When the doctor opens the black bag in the morgue, he sees that the body is crying and drooling, and what he discovers leaves him in shock. Metal scraping against the rail, the morgue door groans with a short, cold moan, as if it had teeth. The smell of disinfectant hits him first, strong, burning his nose. The clock on the wall reads 3:11. Ismail pauses for a second before entering. He puts his hand in his coat pocket as if searching for courage there. He takes a short breath. Come on. The white light flashes once and stabilizes. The floor shines from being so clean, but the cold rises through his shoes. The stretcher arrives, pushed by a hooded worker. The wheels squeak on top of the closed black bag. A label hangs from the zipper. Female. No ID. The writing is hurried. Someone back there murmurs near the wall, almost apologizing for existing. Homeless. Ismail slowly raises his face. He doesn't like that word. He erases it, places the registration form on the counter, and replies quietly, without arguing but firmly, "Please don't say that." The worker looks up, surprised. "Sorry, doctor. That's how they write it down here." "No, here we write down person." Silence. Only the sound of the refrigerator in the background, and the hand of the clock ticking dryly at 3:11. It still seems like the seconds don't want to pass. Ismail takes the pen and signs the receipt. The gesture is automatic, but his hand feels heavy. He writes, "Received at 00:03:11, and the numbers come out crooked." He changes hands, wipes the sweat from his fingers on his gown. The pen fails. He shakes it, scratches a corner of the paper until the ink returns. A silly detail, but annoying. Why? Why does everything in here seem stuck? The worker clears his throat. "I was coming from the emergency room, doctor. They said there was paperwork missing." He hesitates, looks at the black bag on the floor. "They said he has no family." Family. The phrase enters, cold, like the air in the room. Ismail doesn't even notice he's holding his breath. He lets it out slowly, as if afraid to make a noise. No one asked for his name. He insists without raising his voice. "I think so," but the boy shrugs. "They didn't find much, not even papers. He arrived like that. People were running around. It's a lot of work." Ismail puts 2 fingers on the edge of the stretcher. The metal is so cold that it gives you chills. He doesn't open the bag. Not now. He just touches it, and it's like touching a closed door. A presence. A weight. The silence grows. The lamp hums. The air smells like wet rags and alcohol. Something is wrong. The thought comes without permission. He tries to shake it off like a mosquito. Why? There is no reason, no data, no protocol that explains this discomfort in his chest. But there it is, stubbornly scratching inside. Something is wrong. His body knows it before his head does. He needs something else. Doctor asks the worker, uncomfortable with his restless hands in his pockets. "Your name says Ismail," still looking at the label on the bag. "Yours Mauro, thank you." "Mauro, leave the stretcher. I'll sign the rest." Mauro nods. His face relaxes, but before leaving, he glances quickly at the bag, as if asking for permission. He leaves with short steps. The metal door closes with another groan, and the room returns to be just Ismail, the cold, the clock, and the black bag. He takes a stamp, dips it in the pad, and marks the card. The sound of the stamp is dry and final, but nothing seems final. He carefully straightens the label on the zipper and adjusts the seal. "Female without documentation." That phrase hurts his eyes. He takes another empty label and sticks it next to the first one, without covering it. He writes slowly, "Unknown person, 03:11. It's not much, he knows, but it's what he can do. Now give a different word to someone who has none. The air conditioning blows on the back of his neck. He shivers again, puts his hands in his pockets, plays with a coffee coin left over from the previous shift. You don't remember if he had coffee? Maybe yes, maybe no. Ismail walks to the sink, turns on the water. The noise breaks. The silence washes his hands harder than necessary. Scrubs. Rinses? He repeats. He knows it's not necessary, but he does it. The soap smells like cheap citrus. He cleans his nails with the little brush. He stops. He looks at his reflection in the metal of the faucet. Dark circles under his eyes. Tight mouth. He closes his eyes for a second. Person murmurs almost without a voice. Person opens his eyes. He returns to the stretcher. The thick plastic of the bag has small folds and some scratches, as if it had been folded in a hurry. The light hits those folds and shines strangely. She observes the contour of the shoulders, the height of the volume, trying to guess stories that do not appear on any file. It is not cold curiosity. It is care. It is a need not to let this moment become just another one. Why, she does not know, but she feels it. Her hand floats over the zipper, then withdraws. It is not the moment. Protocol comes first. She takes a deep breath and speaks with the same calm she uses with the living, as if the person could hear. I'll take good care of it, yes. And the room responds only with the hum of the lamp. He adjusts the sheet under the bag so that the metal doesn't bite. He sets the refrigerator a notch higher. It's not necessary, but he adjusts it anyway. Ismail takes the board again and checks it line by line. Place of origin, time, seal, witness. The driver's signature is missing. He writes a reminder in the corner. See driver. The pen fails again. He taps the paper twice. The ink comes back. See driver. Everything is correct, but nothing is at peace. Good evening, he says, almost as if introducing himself. And only then does he realize that although tired, he called night at a time that is already something else. It doesn't matter. In here, time has another face. The clock reads 3:13 now, but in his mind it is still 3:11, trapped in that first second of discomfort that won't go away. The door bursts open. A nurse enters to begin the procedure, always with two people. He just looks at her and says nothing. She understands that he is late and goes straight for the gloves. The sound of the zipper begins timidly, tooth by tooth, as if chewing the silence of the room. Barbara slowly pulls on the glove. Hers crinkles in the plastic. The air seems colder, thicker. You can hear the clock ticking in the background and smell the disinfectant stuck in your throat. Slowly, Ismail says quietly, almost inaudibly, slowly, Barbara. She nods with her chin, her eyes unblinking. The zipper slides a little further. The bag opens a crack. The white light enters and touches the pale skin. The texture of the plastic shines strangely at the edge, and then a thread of saliva escapes from the corner of the woman's mouth. It is thin, almost invisible, but there it is, shining. It slides smoothly and sticks to her lip like a thread of glass. Barbara stops, her shoulder trembling. "Did you see that?" she whispers, her voice shaking. "Did you see that?" Ismail does not respond immediately. He looks at her whole body, which remains still, as if even her heartbeat had stopped. He takes half a step forward. "I saw something else." A round, heavy tear falls from the corner of the woman's eye and runs slowly. It's not old rain, it's new rain. It leaves a wet trail on the skin and disappears into the sheet. It makes no sound, but it changes everything. The air becomes thick. The room seems to shrink, as if someone had removed half the oxygen and the rest had turned to stone. Barbara opens her mouth, closes it, opens it again. "Doctor, try this." This isn't normal. Her hands tremble inside the glove. Her fingers close around the zipper but don't pull it. Ismail leans his forearm on the edge of the stretcher to steady himself. The metal is cold. He takes a short breath. Maybe he'll start, but the sentence dies. He settles himself and tilts his face. Maybe it's a reflex. It happens sometimes. Even he doesn't believe what he says. Sometimes the word floats in the air and falls without a sound. Chest tightens. And if it isn't, Barbara runs the back of her hand across her forehead, as if she could wipe away the fear. "I don't like this, doctor." "Me neither," she replies without thinking. The light in the room buzzes. The clock ticks again. The string of drool lengthens and falls, leaving a dark spot on the fabric. The tear is gone, but another is forming, small and stubborn, shining in the corner of her eye like a sad pearl. Ismail carefully places 2 fingers on her chin. It's not to move her, just to hold her face, to support her, like someone holding someone else in the middle of a staircase. Her skin is cold, but not icy, like stone. It's a cold that reminds him of shade, not death. "Open a little more," he asks. Just a little more. Barbara obeys. The zipper runs down. The sound is low, but grates on the ear. The woman appears better. Her lower lip has a recent pink micro-crack. The corner of her mouth glistens wet. "Do you want me to clean it?" Barbara asks, already taking a clean gauze pad. "Yes," gently. She touches her with the gauze so gently that it is almost imperceptible. The gauze absorbs the drool and a drop of tear that had remained. Barbara withdraws her hands, suspended in the air. Her breathing is short and rapid, as if she had been running. "This can't be," she begins, and her gaze asks Ismael to finish the sentence. He doesn't. He leans down until his face is close. The smell coming from the bag is plastic, alcohol, and human. It's impossible to explain. It's the smell of skin that was on the street, exposed to wind and dust. It's soft, but it's there. He focuses on her half-open eyes. Her eyelashes stuck together strangely, not blinking. The whites of her eyes have a slight blue tint. "Did you see it?" Barbara repeats, more quietly now, as if the sound might break something. "Did you see it?" "I really saw it, Ismael." He brings his ear close to her mouth. The gesture is old, almost instinctive, one of those he learned long ago, before any device, before any course. His ear approaches the corner of her mouth, where it is still moist. He closes his eyes to hear better. Nothing but his own blood passing through his ear, that sound of the distant sea. He holds his breath so as not to disturb her for a second. 2, 3. Nothing, not even a breath or a short whistle. The silence is so loud that it weighs heavily. He moves away a little, breathes, and comes closer again. His face almost touches her again. His beard brushes against the plastic edge, the coldness of the material rising up his jaw. He holds his own hand in the air so that it doesn't shake. He opens his eyes slowly, still close, watching to see if her skin moves, if her chest makes the slightest movement. It doesn't. Her mouth remains slightly open. The moist glint is still there, and Barbara asks without a voice, only with air, and Ismael straightens up, his heart beating faster, his head doing invisible calculations. 1, 2, he shouts. "Did you see that?" The other half shouts. "Careful. Look again, the new tear that is now beginning to fall. Maybe it is." He tries again. Maybe it is a post-mortem reflection. It can happen. We know it. He speaks but feels the floor move half a centimeter. The word maybe has become a very long corridor. He runs his hand over his chin. He thinks about touching the woman's neck, but stops halfway. He knows what he is doing there, and he also knows what he is feeling. This. Hey, Barbara. Swallow. This gave me chills too. They both fall silent. The room grows denser. The lamp flickers for a moment. The cold enters through the sleeves of the gown. Barbara crosses her arms as if to protect herself. Ismael smooths the edge of the sheet. The fabric is stiff, ironed. He pulls at 1 mm just to make it even. Small thing, busy hand, mind trying not to fall into the void. "Doctor," Barbara returns quietly. "You know, yes, phases, yes. It was a reflex. Why does it feel so?" She searches for the word. "So right now." He doesn't respond. His whole body is a question. She looks again at the drop in the corner of his eye. She sees the skin around it a little swollen, but not much. She sees a loose hair stuck to his forehead from sweat or static. She sees nothing, and she sees everything. I don't know. Sincerity comes out raw, simple. It's a reflex, an illusion. The question enters, occupies space. It sits in the center of the room. He feels it. She doesn't run away. She has no answer, and that hurts. Barbara takes half a step back and bumps her back against the table. The noise is small. She lets out a short, nervous cry and an unfunny laugh, the kind that comes out when you're about to cry. "Sorry. It's okay." He leans in again, brings his ear closer again, as if insisting were enough. The smell of the glove rises a mixture of latex and soap. She closes her eyes, holds her breath, counts silently. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nothing. But that nothingness is not empty now. It is a heaviness that touches her skin, that squeezes her neck. She moves away, slowly, without making a sound. She opens her eyes. The new tear has fallen too, tracing a clean path across her cold skin. It is a thin, crooked line that crosses her face and disappears into the sheet, like someone sinking into the earth. The silence weighed down the air, which was still and thick. The light made a soft humming sound. Ismail's hand went alone to the instrument drawer. The metal scraped open. Inside, in the blue plastic cradle, was the small, simple digital thermometer. It seemed like nothing, but at that moment, it was everything. "Doctor," Barbara called without approaching. "What are you going to do?" "Measure," he replied softly, as if asking for permission. "Just measure." She took a step, hesitated, took half a step back. Her eyes said no. Her hand said, "Please be careful." He grabbed some alcohol and cotton and cleaned the screen. He ran it over the body of the device very carefully, almost like a ritual. Any mistake would be an excuse, and he didn't want to give anyone an excuse. "There's protocol," whispered Barbara. "You know, before anything else, the authorization document, the stamp." "I know," said Ismail without raising his voice. "I know." He approached the bag. The thick plastic crinkled. He pulled the fabric just necessary to reach the skin of the arm. His skin was cold from the shade, not from the stone. He slid the thermometer into the armpit carefully, like someone arranging cutlery on a napkin. His hand remained steady. The device clicked. The short beep lit up the screen. Now they had to wait. Time dragged on. A single beep was lost in the hum of the lamp. He didn't breathe heavily so as not to disturb anyone, not even himself. He looked at his watch without seeing, listening to his heart in his throat. Barbara crossed her arms, hugging herself in fear. Her robe trembled a little, and yes, she started. "Shh," he asked kindly. "Just a second." The screen flickered. A bar advanced. He knew that path. It was nothing, just electronics, but that day, it seemed like a lit candle on a night without light. He looked again at her skin, the corner of her eye still wet. His finger brushed the cold plastic of the bag. The room didn't breathe. The thermometer beeped. He took it out slowly, holding it so that the number wouldn't go away. 334.9 degrees. He repeated it in his head in a slow voice so that it would fit. 34.9 degrees. "Barbara." His voice didn't come out at first. He wiped the screen with his thumb as if the number could be erased. 34.9 degrees. She opened her eyes. "No, it can't be. It doesn't add up." The words came out on their own. They didn't add up with the still body in the cold room. They didn't add up with the time in the morgue. They didn't add up with the stamp, the label, the word that had hurt him before. Homeless. It didn't add up to anything. Barbara took a step, looked at the screen, then looked at him. Her mouth opened a little, but no words came out. "If you're wrong," she said softly, as if afraid of breaking something if she was wrong. "Your license." The rest didn't come out, but he understood. He saw the suspended credential, the investigation, people pointing fingers at him, doors closing. He saw his children looking at him with shame. He saw everything at once, and for a second, his body wanted to retreat. He refused. "It's not a mistake," he said, and now his voice was firm. "It could be that the device is malfunctioning. It could be, but it doesn't add up here inside at this moment. That number doesn't add up." He grabbed the alcohol again, cleaned it again, changed the battery. No, there was no reason to, but he still tapped the back of the thermometer like his father used to do with the old ones. It wasn't science, it was nerves. He put it on the other side again, same click. He waited. His hand didn't shake. If it had, he would have held it with the other. "Doctor," he asked Barbara, "please, here I am." She shook her head. Her eyes were wet and shining. The gown seemed too big for her. Time stretched out again. The second beep sounded. He took out the thermometer. The screen showed 34.9 degrees again. This time, he didn't doubt what he was feeling. It was as if someone had turned on a light inside. He knew that feeling. It only came when things were really serious. His whole body was pointing in the same direction. It wasn't noise. It wasn't fantasy. It was real. "It doesn't add up," he said firmly. "It doesn't add up with the room. It doesn't add up with the time. It doesn't add up with—" He stopped, bit his tongue, and kept it to himself. He didn't want to say the word that hurt. Barbara leaned on the cart as if she needed support. She ran her hand through her hair and took a short breath. "Doctor, please, if someone comes in now, if someone sees me, you understand. I'm with you. I am. But there's protocol. If something goes wrong, they'll take away your license." "Me too. I have 2 children. I understand," he replied, looking her in the eyes. "I understand every word." She breathed in. The air came in short, but it came. Her hand went down and touched the edge of the sheet. She felt the hard texture. She remembered what she swore when she put on that gown, not the oath of the photo shoot, the other silent one that is made there in the cold, when no one is watching, not to let go of the hand of the one who can return. She spoke softly so that it would fit in the case and in her chest. I'm not going to let him die here. Barbara bit her lip. Her eyes dropped to the screen, rose to him, returned to the bag. She knew he was breaking the line that protected them. She knew the size of the shadow. Even so, there are nights that don't accept that we are alone. At least them, she said, trying to find a middle ground. At least write down what he gave me. Write down the time. Write it down correctly. If anyone asks, we'll show them. He grabbed the folder. The pen failed. He shook it and wrote again. He wrote large, clearly, without scribbling. Axillary temperature 34.9 degrees C. Recorded at 00:03:14. Device tested. Her hand with goosebumps, her chest firm. She signed her name at the bottom. It weighed heavily, but she wouldn't erase it. Will you help me check? She showed him the sheet. She didn't need his help, but she wanted her not to feel alone. Barbara read. She ran her finger over 30 and 4. 9 degrees, as if touching the number, gave her courage. She nodded. Swallowed. He put the thermometer away, cleaned it, changed the cover. Everything. In order. He didn't do anything in a hurry. Courage wasn't disorder. It was care. He ran his fingers over the seal, checked that it was the same as before, adjusted the label so that no one would say he broke anything. Respect wasn't. Silence. Respect was approaching with care. Barbara stared as if looking for the floor. He gave her the floor. He had direct gaze, low voice, clear step. Stay with me, he asked. I'll stay, she said. Almost a sigh. They stayed. The clock marked 1 more minute. But inside, it was the same stretched second. The room was still cold. The air was still heavy. The number on the paper looked like an open door in a dark hallway. He didn't know what was ahead. He knew what was there. A person and a thermometer that didn't lie. I'm not going to let, he repeated now, for him, for her, for anyone who wanted to hear. I'm not going to let him die. Here the plastic of the bag gave way a little when Ismail pulled the sheet back to uncover the ankle. The light hit the pale skin and made him blink there. Hanging from a simple cord was the label. Thick black letters. Cold. Female. 28. 35 years old. He read slowly, as if reading slowly would change what it said. It didn't change the time, the area code, or anything about the name. A blank space that looked like a hole without a document. No ID, Barbara said very quietly, as if apologizing for giving the news without a name. Yes, he replied, and the phrase scraped inside him. The ankle was thin. The skin had little purple dots from pressure, the kind that appear when the day has been too hard. The string of the label left a soft mark on the side, a small old scar like a pencil scratch. Ismail's eyes looked at every detail, searching for any clue that would say, I am nothing. The system needs the name to close the record, Barbara commented, opening the computer screen nervously. If I leave it blank, a red alert appears. Required field, he repeated, looking at the label. How ironic. She bit her lip. It wasn't her fault. It wasn't anyone's fault. Anyone there. It was just a world that demanded a name to accept that someone existed. And when the name didn't come, everything got stuck. Ismail touched the label with the tip of his glove, carefully. The paper was thick, somewhat rough, not easily torn. He turned it over slowly and looked at the blank back. Not a scratch, not a mark from some tired doctor. Blank. Who are you? Escaped him very softly, almost pure air. The silence returned the question back to him, louder. Who are you? Who called you back home yesterday? Who waited for you, watching the door? Who knows the color of your laughter? Who gave you that old scar on your ankle? Who taught you to tie your hair? Who do you love? Who loves you, doctor? Barbara tried to fill the void. Sometimes the name appears, later. Someone calls. Someone comes. Sometimes, he said, but the word weighed heavily on him. He bent down a little, rested his elbow on the stretcher, moved closer to the foot, to the cord, to the void, his breath touching the mask, the fabric sticking to his mouth, hot moisture, the cold of the room rising up his legs, and again that voiceless question he wouldn't let go. Ismail pulled the sheet a little more, just to see the hands. They were the hands of someone who worked, short nails with a little worn-off clear polish, a discreet callus on the middle finger of her right hand, where a pen or scissors had once been, a circle of slightly lighter skin on her ring finger, where a ring had once been, today, without a ring. "Do you see this?" she said softly, pointing with her chin. "I see it," Barbara replied, her eyes softening. "Someone took the ring off, or she doesn't wear it anymore. It could be many things. No, it can't be." The palm had a stain that didn't come off with alcohol. It looked like dirt. It looked like fine dust from the street. He didn't clean it. He looked at it. It wasn't dirt. It was history. Stuck to it. It came from walking from the bus, from the sun, from life that runs and stops at the traffic lights. He didn't invent anything. He just felt it in the system. "I'll put unknown," Barbara asked, fear in her voice. Ismail closed his eyes for a second. The word unknown hurt less than homeless, but it still hurt. It was a label that left the person in a place without a floor. "Put unknown person, and the exact time." "Yes, doctor," she typed. The sound of the keyboard, tick-tick, seemed very loud in that room. He returned to the ankle and read the label again. Female, 28 to 35 years old. He didn't want that to be all there was to her. An age and a gender. It was so little, almost nothing. "I need to know your name," whispered Ismail near the foot, in the tone one uses when someone hurts you and doesn't want to scare them. "I need to know your name." The language changed easily, as if the phrase was already waiting in his mouth. His throat tightened. He felt like apologizing for not knowing, for not being able to say Carmen, Rosa, Maria, Ana, any name that would call to her soul by her real nickname, Barbara. She stood next to him without speaking, just staying there. Her presence held part of the weight. "You know when you lose a key," she said after a while. "You call the key as if it could answer. 'Where are you, key?' And suddenly the name appears. That's how it is. You say it, and the person appears whole or without a name. It seems that the person can't find their way back." Ismail looked at her. He didn't know if he agreed because it was nice or because it was true. Maybe both. "Let's call you," he said. "Let's call you until you come." Ismail saw the slightly sparse eyebrow on the left side, as if an old scar had opened up there. He saw a hair caught in the brown closure with sun-bleached highlights. He saw the ear without an earring, the earlobe with its small hole. He saw the soft shape of the mouth. He saw an almost smile that was not a smile, perhaps a shape of a mouth left over from some "good morning" said in haste. He saw what he could see without invading, without guessing too much. She began, "Barbara," and did not finish. She was crying silently. A tear caught in the corner of her eye, stubbornly holding its place. "Sorry, don't ask any more," he said softly. He reached out and touched the edge of the sheet, the simplest gesture in the world, just that holding a piece of fabric was his way of saying, "I'm here." It was his way of talking to someone who had no name on paper, but did somewhere. Someone loved that name. Someone whispered it in their ear. Someone shouted it from a window. That name existed. It was just far away. "If you're there," whispered Ismail, without realizing he was mixing languages. "Speak to me softly. Tell me your name, even if it's just one syllable. I'm listening." Barbara took a deep breath and wrote in the corner of the register in beautiful handwriting, as if embroidering, "Wait for identification. Search for name." She showed it to him apologetically, as if she had drawn on the edge. He felt her. "It's okay. Sometimes you have to write what your heart wants to do, so that no one forgets it." Then she rearranged the label, leaving the paper without creases, and the cord without tightening the skin. It was no big deal, but for a moment it seemed to restore a little dignity. She spoke again softly and respectfully. "I'm going to call you until you tell me what you want to be called, until someone says, 'It's her.'" Ismail held his breath for a second and let his hand obey, close before her head. He brought 2 fingers to her jaw, searching for the right spot. It wasn't violence. It was a call. He pressed firmly. That touch that makes the nerves scream even though the body wants to hide. "Ready with me," he murmured, almost asking for permission. "Sorry, it's going to hurt a little. Nothing at first. The skin just got cold." Ismail increased the pressure a little. A minimal response ran through the masseter muscle like a weak wave under the skin. "Barbara, light here," she asked. She already had the flashlight. The beam cut through the white of the room and settled on her eyes. With her other hand, she gave the stimulus to the trapezius, a calculated clinical pinch. Silence thundered. The pupil was slow and stubborn, like a lizard in the sun, but it moved. A circle that tightened just a little, and stopped as if thinking, "It's worth it. You see that?" She let go quietly without letting go of the nerve. Yes, I saw it," Barbara replied, swallowing. "It's slow, but it reacted again. They changed sides." She repeated the pinch. Her body let out a silent sigh, an almost invisible contraction at the corner of her mouth. She touched her sternum with her fingers. A short, coordinated pressure. It wasn't to hurt. It was to call out to the one who stayed at the bottom of the well. The flashlight passed again. Pupil of the other eye also obeyed later. Like a rebellious girl who comes by force, she squeezed a little. She let go, a little slowly. "Come," she said softly as if the word could pull. "Come with me, please." The room breathed together. The closure of the bag looked like a still animal watching the clock. It gave a sharp knock. Ismail brought the back of his hand close to his nose, 2 fingers away, without touching any air. But when he brought his fingers to his own lip, he felt something cold that wasn't there before. Moisture, a nothing that was nothing. "Wait," he said, leaving his hand floating again inches from his nose, holding his own breath until it hurt, and then a caress of air brushed his skin. Tiny, uncertain, like the breath of a candle that almost goes out but tries to live. Barbara held back a sob. "Doctor, I felt it." He came closer, put his ear sideways, almost touching her mouth, and prepared his whole body to hear what he didn't want to hear. There was no clear sound, just an almost, just a raising of dust in 1-4 closed. "It's a breath," he said, more to himself. "It's small, but it came." He removed a finger and returned with the flashlight. Pupils slow again, but obedient. He called. The body took a step. He called again. "Sorry," he warned, and squeezed the trapezius again. The muscle hardened in a quick spasm. The mouth opened 1 millimeter, as if searching for the word water. A clearer drop wet the corner of the lip. He removed his hand, let the pain pass with everyone else, brought his ear closer again, almost again, a touch of life escaping the cold. Barbara said, and now her voice had weight. Barbara froze for a moment as if someone had shouted fire inside her. Now here the words came out stumbling. "Doctor, wait. That's going to cause problems," Barbara repeated without raising her voice, but without leaving any space. "Bring her green with a belt. Don't call anyone. You come now." She ran to the wall and pulled out the transport stretcher. The wheels protested. The metal screeched loudly, a sound that split the air like thunder in a dry sky. Lock it, he said. She lowered the lever. The click sounded loud. Ismail slid the sheet under her shoulders, adjusted her head without straining her neck, and pinned the tag to the sheet so it wouldn't get lost. Every movement seemed to weigh twice as much. The plastic scraped against the sheet, which resisted. His hand sweated inside the gloves. 1, 2, he counted so the body would hear the invitation. 3, lift. Lifting what was still was difficult. It didn't weigh much, but the respect was enormous. They moved slowly, as one would carry a glass of water to one's mouth. The air changed, becoming warmer. Or was it his blood boiling? "Hold her head," Barbara asked. She received the back of the neck with both hands, a firm cradle. He brought the torso, rested it on his forearm, slid the plastic out of the bag, scraped the metal of the stretcher like coarse sandpaper. The body yielded, touched the mattress, rested. He adjusted the sheet until there were no folds that could cause pain. "Belt," she said. He closed the clicks one by one, like someone tying 1,000 so it wouldn't escape. The sound of the first belt was too loud in her head. He checked that nothing was pressing where it shouldn't. One more belt, then another. "We're going to go out the side door," he said quietly. Barbara stood next to him and held the bar. Her hand was shaking, but she didn't let go. She breathed through her mouth, trying not to cry, trying not to scream. "I'm scared." He saw it. He felt it. She was grateful that he was there. "Doctor," she whispered, "if someone comes, what are you going to say?" "I heard a breath," he replied. "Of course. And I won't let a breath die in a black bag." She closed her eyes for a second, as if she were holding on to something, in a whisper. "Yes. If someone comes, what will you say?" "That I heard a breath," he replied. "Of course. And I won't let a breath die in a black bag." She closed her eyes for a second, as if to keep the phrase in a safe place. He turned the stretcher, the wheels aligned, accidentally hitting the corner of the table. The noise was small, but inside it sounded like a siren. "Come on." He took the first step, the second, the third. Every centimeter seemed to steal years from his body and restore his courage. They reached the door. The metal bar was cold as hospital ice. He leaned on his shoulder against it and pushed. The door opened with a bang. The sound traveled down the hallway, bounced off the white walls, and came back louder. And if it sounds bad, it was. A voice cut in sharply. "What is that? An assistant on duty? Eyes open? You're carrying a body." Another voice from the next room. "Who authorized this?" And quick footsteps began to sound. Shoes hitting wheels. Running, short breaths. Barbara opened her eyes toward him. "My God," she whispered. He felt that old sensation of being at the center of a wave about to crash. His chest tightened, but his body did not recoil. He pushed the stretcher half a step beyond the threshold. The metal screeched. The cold draft bit at his wrists. "Dr. Bonilla," someone said his name with surprise and reproach. "Are you crazy?" He still did not respond. His hand remained firm on the stretcher bar. He looked for a moment at her face, the nameless person, and listened again to almost nothing, almost a dream, that touch of life that did not want to be forgotten. Barbara said, just to herself, without taking her eyes off the front, "Stay with me." She swallowed hard. "Here I am." The door moved again behind them, hit by the air coming in and out, and for a moment that lasted an eternity, everyone was caught between what the paper said and what their conscience demanded. The hallway stared, mouths opened, hands prepared to stop the risk, which grew like a shadow invading the room. Ismail planted his feet on the cold floor and did not let go of the bar. He continued toward the door. The hallway was also cold, like a parking lot in the early morning. The lights flickered a little, that flickering that gives you a headache. The wheels of the stretcher squeaked every time they passed over a joint in the floor. Clack, clack. That sound cut through the air and seemed to announce everything Ismail didn't want announced. A janitor appeared around the corner with a black garbage bag on his shoulder. He saw the stretcher, saw the pale face, saw the label, and stopped. His eyes opened wide, like someone who sees lightning very close by. His right hand went up on its own, and he quickly crossed himself twice, like someone putting out a fire with a dead palm that cries. He whispered in a raspy voice, avoiding looking too much, "That's the devil's work." The phrase hit Ismail in the chest like a stone. For a second, he felt anger. Anger because they reduced pain to superstition, because they pushed fear, which demanded caution. But along with the anger came another feeling. Fear rose down his spine, a coldness that entered through the back of his neck and reached his stomach. What if he was seeing what he wanted to see? What if it was only his desire that invented a breath? What if he was pulling a shadow and calling life? The questions gnawed at him inside. He didn't answer. The hallway smelled of chlorine and stale coffee. The janitor took 2 steps back, pressed himself against the cleaning cart, and lowered his head, murmuring something Ismail didn't understand. Perhaps a prayer, perhaps an apology. "Excuse me," said Ismail gently. The janitor pressed himself even closer to the wall, his hand still on his chest, glancing sideways as if afraid of waking something. Ismail pushed the stretcher. Barbara held the other side. Their hands sweated on the bar, slipping a little, but they didn't let go. The sound of the wheels continued. Clack, clack, clack every time they passed a door. Someone looked up. A technician, a guard, another doctor on duty. They all had the same reflex. Fear, doubt, retreat, murmurs, fragments of phrases from the morgue at this hour. Who authorized this? Ismail kept pace. He didn't run. He didn't slow down too much. The body next to him breathed almost nothing that only he had heard, and he clung to that. If she's alive, the rule is to save her. He repeated it inside his head, like someone holding onto a rope in the dark. They turned the last corner before the emergency room. They could see the automatic door, the red letters emergency, a warmer light inside. The sound changed. Voices, footsteps, the beeping of monitors, the world in motion. And the guardian of no appeared before the door opened. A new resident, thin face, hair tied in a makeshift bun, face mask pulled up to his nose. Clipboard in hand, the body had already arrived, blocking the way. Standing in the middle of the passageway, arms open like a barrier. "Stop there," he said firmly without shouting, but with a wall in his voice. "Where are you going with that?" Barbara took half a step back. Ismail held the stretcher. "Bar tighter." "Emergency room," he replied. "We need an evaluation now." The resident looked at the label, looked at the two of their clothes, looked at Ismail's face, evaluated everything, and let loose the usual speech. "Rules are rules, Dr. Bonilla. Authorization document. Protocol. You know how it works. Nothing comes in without registration, without an order, without a bed. That's not how it is. That's not how it is when he's dead," said Ismail without raising his voice. "When he may be alive, it's different." He frowned, almost with pity. "You come from the morgue with a—" He searched for the word and chose the coldest one. "With a body, your place is elsewhere. You are breaking procedure." His blood is pounding, pounding in Ismail's ears. He responded slowly, syllable by syllable, so that no one would confuse firmness with shouting. "If she's alive, the rule is to save her." The resident clutched the clipboard as if it were a shield. "They can punish me too. What if it was just a reflex? What if it was an illusion? What if it was life?" Ismail interrupted him without cutting him off. "What if it was life, and we lose it because of a piece of paper?" The emergency room hallway was crowded with so many people, and yes, it was dizzying. Behind the resident, a family could be seen sitting on plastic chairs. A woman hugged a sleeping child, his head hanging down. A man scratched his forehead. A guard looked at his cell phone. The normal world of the night, and there they were, with the world turned upside down. "Document," repeated the resident, clinging to the only argument he had. "Authorization. Protocol." Ismail took half a step forward, not like someone looking for a fight, but like someone offering his face to be read. "Document, then authorization. I'll sign. Protocol first. Save him. You know me. I'm not irresponsible." "It's not personal, doctor," he said, but his shoulders tensed. "I have orders. The door won't open." He looked again, and his skin bristled. "For this." And then the voice exploded in the room. No one knew where it came from, only that it came loud, with rage, with fear. It could have been a guard, a tired technician, the resident himself. It could have been someone's chest saying, "Enough." The sound grew, stirring everything up. No, the scream cut through the emergency room like a knife. Everyone turned around. The child in her lap woke up scared. The mother hugged him. The receptionist opened her eyes for a second. It seemed as if the earth was splitting apart. The resident took a deep breath, as if trying to control the chaos. The scream left a silence. Not empty, a heavy silence. The kind that makes you hear even the blink of an eye. Ismail's will was to scream louder, but he didn't. He gathered everything that made him a man and a doctor, and spoke softly, as if whispering in the ear of someone he loved. "If she's alive, the rule is to save her." He didn't look away. Neither did the resident. The silence grew, waiting for the decision. The people around held their breath. Barbara looked at Ismail with pleading eyes that begged, "Say yes, please." He didn't tremble. He was afraid too, but fear did not control him. The automatic door felt the weight of the moment, as if it were a person. The resident moved 1 centimeter, just one, and that was enough for the world to move forward. He stepped aside. "Come in," he said, almost without a voice, as if he were breaking a bone inside. "But you are responsible for everything here, and on paper, I take responsibility." The silence became floor. The door opened. The warm air of the emergency room touched the cold faces of the two. The stretcher entered. A beep sounded inside, like a green light, and they passed. Ismail adjusted the sheet until the fold stopped pressing on his wrist. It was then that he saw it on her wrist, tightly fastened, a red ribbon, faded from so much sun and quick washing. It wasn't from the hospital. It was one of those promise ribbons from a saint's market, a red that had already turned pale pink, with a sad shine on the edge. "Wait," he said softly. "Look at this." Barbara leaned in, the light from the flashlight making a warm circle on her wrist. The ribbon had a double knot, a small, firm knot, the kind you make in a hurry, but with love. The hand-embroidered stitching was crooked and slightly irregular, as if someone inexperienced had done it. Anyway, small, tightly packed letters that time had already erased around the edges. "Let me see," Barbara said, bringing her face closer, holding her breath. Ismail ran the tip of his glove underneath, just to lift it a little without squeezing the skin. The ribbon scratched a little. It had the texture of cheap fabric, but with a weight to it, you could tell. It smelled like the street, like sweet perfume, almost gone, a little cleaning alcohol. He turned the wrist carefully with the flashlight. He found the letters ADD, or a shaky D, a letter in the middle that was a hole, and a timid O, too round, between one letter and another, loose threads. The thread that was missing, the dot that had escaped. He said he asked without taking his eyes off Barbara. She spelled it out. "Something is missing," she said, biting her lip, thinking aloud. God, could it be? Ismail did not answer right away. The word God filled the mouth of church promise, plea, fear, and gratitude. At the same time, it could be. It could also be something else. It could be a name. It could be a nickname. It couldn't be a pocket prayer. "It's half crooked," she said, talking about the embroidery, but feeling something else inside. Someone did it in a hurry, or with a trembling hand. Or a little girl, she said with shining eyes. "It looks like a little girl's embroidery." They were caught for a second in that image. Little hands giant, needle tongue, out from so much concentration. Someone blowing carefully. "My love," and the red fabric receiving letters as best it could. A gift of love that didn't need to look pretty to be valuable. "Do you want to take it off?" Barbara asked, already with the scissors in her hand, but waiting for an answer. "No, for now. It's not hers." Ismail touched the knot with his little finger. He just brushed it. The knot was worn, but firm. It looked old. It looked new. It was one of those knots that someone makes and says, "Just cut it." When I come back. When I get better. When I promise again. "Oh," he repeated, as if calling someone from afar. "Oh." Suddenly the silence changed flavor. It was as if the ribbon opened a little window to her world. A window the size of a doll, but full of history. If that was faith, it had arrived just the right size. If it was a name, it was asking to be said in full. Could it be God? Barbara insisted softly. With respect, many people tie her like this. Make a promise that God will take care of her, that God will protect her. Could it be him? She nodded. Could it be? She brought the flashlight closer. The edge of the D had a loose thread, a strand that almost unraveled in the light. The middle letter was a ghost, just a shadow on the fabric, as if someone had approached it, and then time had eaten it away. The final O was clear, round, simple. "Full king is God," he murmured, without wanting to preach, just thinking someone asked for something big. No one embroiders God without clinging to life with their teeth, yes. Barbara nodded. And if it's not God, and if it is, she stopped, closed her eyes, trying to guess. And if it's a name, Ismail felt his heart take a step back. Name that pain came back, that hunger to know what to call her. The doll became a little piece of paper. Maybe that's what she followed, her mouth almost touching the air. Dora Sunday. Dawn laughed nervously. "I'm guessing. Doro Dono. Nothing to do with it. It could just be a beginning and an end," he said. Maybe the middle got lost along the way. She let out a sad, one of those that embrace without touching. Ismail asked for the little scissors, not to cut the ribbon, but a little thread that was scratching her skin. "Calm," he said. For her, for him, for the moment. It's just a loose thread, the knot stays. He held the ribbon with his fingertips, lifted it up a little, cut the thread that was pinching. The scissors made a timid click, let go of the ribbon, returned it to its exact place as if to say, "I'm not moving from here better this way," said Barbara, relieved it doesn't hurt anymore. He ran his hand over it gently as if adjusting a strand of hair, and then made a simple decision, almost invisible, but giant, inside. She couldn't let that clue get lost, either in the rush or on paper or in hands that couldn't see. She had to remember. She had to ask. She had to keep going. "I'm going to keep it," she said, looking at her. "Not the ribbon. Never the ribbon. What can be taken without taking it from her?" She grabbed a small piece of gauze and with a fine-tipped pen copied what she saw, exactly, with the mistakes and everything, and drew the trembling D in the middle, the round O below. She wrote, "Wrist red ribbon, hand embroidered, time date, small signature." Barbara looked at him with respect that warmed. "You're going to find that D.O. right, yes." She folded the gauze carefully, as if folding an old photo, and put it in the inside pocket of her gown, where things that can't be lost go. The fabric touched her chest. The slight weight of nothing became everything of O rep. She repeated it once more to memorize the sound. "If it is God, I respect it. If it is a name, I call it." Barbara adjusted her wrist, checking that the ribbon was not too tight. She loosened it 1 millimeter, just enough for the skin to breathe, without betraying the one who tied it. "It looks pretty on her," she said tenderly. "It looks like protection, like a message," said Ismael. The flashlight turned off by itself, as if it had already shown what it had to show. He turned it on for a second longer, and then turned it off. They no longer needed much light to know that there was a stubborn, worn, red mark there. Ismael covered the wrist again with the sheet, leaving the ribbon outside. He did not hide it. He respected it. It was like leaving the door ajar for a name to pass through. Before removing his hand, he spoke almost soundlessly. "If it is God, may he not let you go. If it is a name, give me a clue. Tell me who you are. Tell me who the pocket of the robe was slightly heavy," reminding him that he now carried an embroidered question. And amid the chaos, amid the noise that came and went, Ismael found a clear thread to follow. The red detail, the beginning and end of a name that sooner or later would want to be said in full. The monitor made that dry click before turning on, as if forcibly awakening the blue screen, which flickered or turned off. It flickered again, and finally the cold, motionless straight line appeared. The silence weighed as heavily as the cold that refused to leave the room. Ismael adjusted the cables, placed the sensor on her finger, and pressed it firmly, almost begging the device to believe what he had felt. The screen was slow to respond. Every second seemed like a whole minute. Then, a small sigh of life, the line vibrated almost lazily, rising 1 millimeter, falling, and then resting again. A timid movement that anyone could have ignored if they didn't believe, but not him, not Barbara, who was already holding her breath like someone who sees a miracle being born and dying at the same time. "Look," whispered Ismael. "I saw it," replied Barbara with wet eyes. The line was not steady. It was almost nothing, a faint wave like a dry leaf moving in a gentle breeze. But there it was, impossible to ignore. Ismael put his ear to her mouth again and held his breath. He felt almost nothing, but there was a slight brush, like someone blowing dust off a forgotten page. "She's breathing," he murmured to himself, to the world, to anyone who would listen. "She's breathing." Barbara spoke for the first time without fear. "Wake up, please," she whispered as she wiped the damp gauze across the woman's face. Her gesture was delicate, almost motherly. She wiped away the drool and dried the tear that still marked the skin, then smoothed the hair stuck to her forehead. "My love, open your eyes just a little." Her face regained its dignity with that simple care, and that pushed Ismael. He couldn't let that thread go out. He ran to the table, grabbed the thermal blanket, and connected it to the portable heater. The noise of the motor was low and constant, like artificial respiration. He covered her body slowly, respecting every fold, every centimeter. "It has to be slow," he said in a firm but low voice, as if talking to himself. I can't force her. She needs to come back slowly, without fear. He adjusted the IV, prepared the line, and the needle slid into the back of her hand. The vein appeared timid, but still responded. That gave him courage. He connected the bag and let the first drop. The liquid flowed, as if it were life entering in slow motion. The IV ran automatically, but with an emotion that could not be contained in any report. Barbara confirmed with a nod. She did not take her eyes off the woman. Her fingers rested gently on the patient's forehead, as if calling someone back from the depths. You're here with us now, she whispered. Stay here, my girl. Ismail prepared the glucose and tested it twice to be sure. He filled the syringe patiently, without rushing. The clear liquid seemed simple, but he knew what it could mean now. He injected it slowly into the line and released the first dose. The glucose entering confirmed the monitor responded with another sigh. Clearer this time. Still small, but bigger than the first. Ismail held his breath. He didn't want to celebrate prematurely, but his chest was pounding. Come on, muchacha. It escaped from his mouth. Just a little more. Barbara looked at him and smiled sideways, but her eyes were still filled with tears. She's fighting, you can tell. He adjusted the temperature of the blanket 1 degree higher. More heat entering, taking away the cold that the morgue had already stolen from her body. She reacted slowly. Her skin took on a less gray tone, almost imperceptible, but he noticed it. The color changed, Barbara said excitedly. Doctor, look, it changed. Ismail looked. It was a little, but it was real. Her face was still motionless, but the shadow of death was no longer so heavy. The line on the monitor remained weak but persistent. A minimal ripple, then another, then a pause. He didn't take his eyes off it. It was like watching a little girl learning to breathe for the first time. Keep going, just keep going, he murmured. He knew it wasn't certain. He knew the line could disappear at any moment. But now it was there. A spark that asked for space, that asked for warmth, that asked for time. Barbara squeezed her hand, even though it was still cold. You're not alone, my love. We're here with you. Ismail took a deep breath. Inside him, fear and hope fought. But hope won by a thread, because even though it was almost imperceptible, she was breathing, and that was enough for him to never let go again. Ismail walked to the sink, turned on the faucet, and let the water run cold, wetting his wrist and splashing his gown. He washed his hands more out of nervousness than necessity. When he looked up, he saw his reflection in the mirror, turned on the tap, and let the cold water run, wetting his wrist and splashing his robe. He washed his hands more out of nervousness than necessity. When he looked up, he saw his reflection in the glass partition. For a moment, he didn't recognize himself. Deep dark circles under his eyes. Unshaven, his face tired from endless nights. But what scared him most was not his appearance, but his eyes, which were filled with an apology he had never spoken aloud. It was as if he were seeing someone who wasn't there, someone who should be there. His chest tightened as if a memory wanted to come out, and he was pushing it back. He looked away quickly, as if the glass had caught him doing something he shouldn't. He took a deep breath and tried to compose himself, but the feeling of emptiness did not go away. The old weight was still there, silent, and the reflection only reminded him that it had never gone away. He returned to the stretcher. The monitor still showed the faint line, but now there was something new. The woman's finger moved first, almost invisible, like a deceptive shiver. Then another clearer tremor, a muscle twitching, wanting to wake up. Doctor, whispered Barbara, her voice breaking. I saw that. I saw it. She held the patient's hand carefully, as if holding glass. Her skin bristled at the touch. The hairs on her arms stood up, a sign that there was still life inside. It's not a reflex, Barbara insisted, her eyes shining with excitement. I know it's not. Ismail looked at the monitor. The faint line was now trying to establish an irregular but lively rhythm. One wave rose, another fell, then a pause. It was fragile, uncertain, but it was not silence. It was not death. His whole body was divided between reason and hope, miracle or mistake. Maybe it was just a malfunction of the machine, maybe the last breath of a lost nerve. But what if it wasn't life returning against all odds? He didn't answer aloud. He just brought his hand close to hers. rested it carefully, and felt the minimal, timid, but real warmth. Barbara smiled, even though she was crying. "He's coming back, Doctor. He's coming back." And for the first time that night, Ismael let doubt turn into hope. Ismael brushed her hair with his fingertips, very gently, as if he didn't want to wake someone who was sleeping badly. Among the strands of hair near her forehead, a recent bump appeared. The skin was swollen and purple underneath, a bruise that still looked alive. When he passed the gauze with saline solution over it, the skin complained. It didn't bleed, but it burned when touched. You could feel the heat of the blow inside. "Here," Barbara called without haste. "Look at this." She brought the flashlight. The light hit the top of her head and showed the shape of the bump better. Next to it were two thin, parallel scratches, as if something had scratched her when she fell. "A fall?" Barbara asked without looking away. "It could be," Ismael replied. "Or an assault." The word hung heavily between them. He didn't make a fuss. He just let it be. He adjusted his body, took his work cell phone, activated the camera in silent mode. Taking photos was a way of recording, was to protect her and them. He looked for the right angle, zoomed in, clicked. The sound was just a dry tick. Another photo with the paper ruler next to it to measure the size. He wrote in the notepad, "Time, place, appearance." "Turn your head a little," he asked, holding the back of her neck with his hand. There, on the back of her neck, just above her hair, he found fine marks, almost like scratches. 3 clear, long lines, as if a rope or cord had been pulled across there and slipped. It didn't cut, but it marked. It was recent. The skin around it was a little red. "See this?" He showed the line. "It's not a scratch from a fingernail." Barbara bit her lip. "It looks like a tie." "I don't know, I thought so too." He took another photo, first with normal light, then with a side flashlight to highlight the relief. He zoomed in until he could see the texture of the skin, linear marks in the nape area. He recorded it, saved it, felt a lump in his throat. He didn't want to jump to conclusions. He wanted to put the pieces together. He looked at her face again. The monitor behind him tried a timid rhythm. The red tape on her wrist rested like a warning. "Someone did this to you." The question came out low, almost like a plea. "Did they push you? Did they pull you? Did they hit you?" Barbara answered for him in a whisper full of affection. "If they did, we'll find out. Hang in there, please." He checked behind her ear, small purple dots like fingerprints. Maybe he didn't say it out loud. He just recorded it with a photo. Carefully, he changed the gauze for a clean one and wiped the cold sweat from his own forehead. The smell of saline and alcohol mixed with the smell of hair washed 2 days ago. Ordinary life. Wound. "Doctor," Barbara called firmly, without drama. "You're going to write that it's suspicious. I'm going to write findings without premature conclusions." He pointed to the screen. "Everything is stored as it should be." She put her cell phone in her pocket with the feeling of holding a map she couldn't yet read. The bump on her head, the lines on the back of her neck, the marks behind her ear, 3 dots. A story. What happened to her? Where? Who was with her? How long was she on the ground? The questions piled up like chips in the early morning. The door slammed open again. Alvarez entered, cutting through the air, his tie crooked, his jacket open, his forehead sweating. He already had his line ready, like someone coming in with fire in his hands. "You dragged that corpse from the morgue all the way here." The tone didn't ask for a response. It was a pure accusation. "You're going to explain this to me now." Barbara took an instinctive step to the side, as if wanting to give space and hide at the same time. Ismael stood between him and the stretcher, not as a barrier, but as a bridge. "She's not dead, sir," he said simply, without raising his voice. Alvarez let out a short, humorless laugh. "Don't test me, Bonilla. They woke me up at 3:30 with a call saying there was a mess in the hallway. Morgue. Emergency. Protocol broken. You know what that means? You know what it costs me. I know," Ismael replied firmly. "That's why I'm here with you, and not hiding." The boss pointed with his chin at the patient. "Homeless label. Morgue stamp. No documents. No name. And you're telling me she's not dead? I'm telling you. Prove it." The word fell like a hammer. "Test it." Next to them, the monitor made a timid wave, an almost electronic breath. It wasn't triumphant. It was fragile. Ismail didn't celebrate. He just pointed. "Look at the screen." Alvarez focused quickly, accustomed to seeing numbers. The line rose and fell irregularly. He frowned and took half a step closer without admitting he had moved closer. "It could be noise," he said. "Badly placed cable. Cold sensor." I know." Ismail nodded. "That's why I measured temperature 34.9 degrees C in a cold room, but high for someone who isn't breathing." The pupil reacted to a painful stimulus, provoking a response, and before he could speak of illusion, he added, "I recorded it. Photo, time, everything on the unit's equipment." The director looked at Barbara and said, "And you're involved in this madness?" She looked at him with a courage that was costing her dearly. "I'm on the person's side, sir. I saw a tear. I saw saliva. I felt a breath. I can't explain it, but I saw it." Alvarez took a deep breath, held it, and let it out through his nose, annoyed. His tie was still crooked. He tried to fix it, and made it worse. He got frustrated and let it go. "I saw it. I felt it. And I repeated it, imitating him, not to mock him, but out of desperation. That doesn't belong in the report, doctor. That doesn't defend me in front of the board. What defends me is paper, is a stamp, is a number." "You asked for proof," Ismail replied, "and I came down with what he had. The proof I have is clinical. It's what we learned. I didn't invent the wave on the monitor, or the bump on his head, or the marks on the back of his neck," he said seriously. "Something happened to him, and now something is happening to us." The silence between them was like a taut rope. Outside, a stretcher passed by. Someone coughed. A radio sounded inside. Only 3 people, a faint line on the screen, and a red band on his wrist that said it was over. Alvarez took another step closer to the bed. His face changed slightly from anger to attention, quickly, almost imperceptibly. Ismail noticed it. The boss looked at his chest in silence. He looked at his mouth, the damp edge now clean. He looked at the skin that had stopped being bluish and had taken on some color. He didn't admit anything, but he saw it. "Test," he repeated, now without shouting, but just as firmly. "Test in a way that I can sustain." Ismail brought his hand a little closer to his face, as he had done before, and remained silent, waiting for that touch of air he had already felt. He did not speak. He did not point. He just waited. Alvarez watched with stiff shoulders and a clenched jaw. Barbara clutched her wrist, her fingers digging into her skin. The monitor tried another rhythm, almost a wave, another pause. The air stopped, and his word, "test," remained between them like a challenge and a sentence. The room held his breath and waited for the phone to ring. It cut through the air like a knife. It wasn't the beep of the monitor or a medical alarm. It was a common, insistent ring that seemed out of place in that heavy silence. Barbara was startled and almost dropped the tray with the gauze. "Answer it, doctor," she said nervously. Ismail walked over to the table and looked at the screen of the landline phone in the area. No number appeared, only an external line. He pressed the green emergency button. "Who's speaking?" Silence. The sound of the air conditioning seemed to increase, as did the hum of the lamp. Long seconds passed. No one answered. He insisted, "Who's there?" His voice came out firm, but low, because he didn't want to wake up the hallway. Nothing. Then the sound of breathing came first. It wasn't his or Barbara's. It was strange, irregular breathing, too close to the microphone, air coming in and out with a noise. You could almost feel the steam in his ear. "Hello?" Barbara asked over his shoulder. "Who is it?" Ismail moved the headset away a little, then pressed it back to his ear. On the other side, the breathing continued, heavy breathing that seemed to contain tears. And then, behind that, something appeared that froze him. A child's cry. It wasn't a tantrum. It was a cry of muffled pain, the kind that comes with hiccups. A small sound, but so real that pierced Ismail like a knife. "There's a child there," he asked quickly, almost in an anguished whisper. "Who's with him? Who's talking?" Barbara put her hand to her mouth, her eyes instantly filling with tears. She shook her head as if asking for it to be a lie. "Doctor," her voice broke. "I heard it too." The child sobbed again, then silence. Only that heavy breathing. Ismail pressed the phone cord, the knot rising up his throat. "Listen, if you can hear me, say something. A name. Anything. Who are you?" Where are you?" The line crackled, as if someone had hit the microphone against their clothes. The crying returned, lower, farther away, and then, suddenly, nothing. The call was cut off. The sharp beep of the call ending filled the room. Ismail stood still with the phone pressed to his ear, even though it was no longer ringing, as if by insisting he could bring back that voice, that cry. "Call was cut off," Barbara asked, afraid of the answer. He slowly lowered his arm, hung up the receiver, and stared at the device as if it had just spat out a secret he didn't want to bear. She looked at him, without hiding her despair. "It was a child, Doctor. It was a child." Ismail said nothing. He opened his mouth, but no voice came out. Inside him, only one question kept pounding. Whose voice was that? Whose cry was that? Barbara quickly dried her eyes with the sleeve of her robe, but continued to look at him, demanding an answer he didn't have. "What do we do now?" he said quietly. He took a deep breath, but didn't answer, because at that moment, all that remained was the emptiness of the disconnected line and the echo of a child's cry that no one knew where it was coming from. The bag with his belongings arrived in a clear plastic box. The janitor handed it over quickly, as if he wanted to get a weight off his shoulders, and left without looking back. Ismail placed the box on the side table. The smell was the first thing that hit him. It wasn't the smell of a hospital. It was the smell of the street, a mixture of dust, dried sweat, cheap plastic, and rotten fruit. A smell that came from the outside world, the world that no one wrote down in a file. "Let's see what's in there," he said, but his voice already sounded heavy. Barbara put on new gloves, and so did he. They opened it together. Inside, there was almost nothing. A handkerchief with stains that wouldn't come out even when washed. An empty mint candy wrapper. Crumpled paper stuck together from being in a pocket for so long. A piece of paper folded in four, thin and sweaty. Ismail opened it carefully. The folds crinkled as if the paper were complaining about being touched. The letters were hastily written in blue ink that was half dry. He read aloud in a low voice, syllable by syllable, "Liberty Market, Stall 17, 6 p.m. Barbara repeated it as if to confirm, "Liberty Market, Stall 17, 6 p.m. The paper smelled like a wet street, as if it had fallen to the ground and someone had picked it up. It was simple, but screamed mystery. An appointment, a job, a warning. She was going to see someone, she murmured. But who? Next to the paper was a heavy coin. He picked it up. It was a medal of the Virgin of Guadalupe, one of those sold at flea markets that you carry in your pocket for protection. The metal was worn from being touched so much. In the center, the figure of the Virgin was almost erased from the rubbing of hands. On the back, there was no date, only scratches. She closed her hand around the coin and felt the cold metal sink into her skin, a cold that was not only physical, but also the cold of imagining how many times she had held it asking for help, how many times she ran her finger over the image so as not to feel alone. "This coin was with her," she said. "It's not an ornament, it's a shield." Barbara felt looking at the object. "My grandmother had one just like it. She only took it off to sleep." Ismail put the coin aside on a clean cloth as if it were something sacred. He put the paper in a hospital envelope and sealed it with his signature. He wasn't going to let it get lost. Every piece mattered. He then turned his eyes to the detail that never left his mind, the red ribbon on her wrist, crookedly embroidered. He approached again, took saline solution, and slowly dropped it onto the fabric. The liquid dripped, wetting the ribbon and restoring color to the thread. Barbara watched in silence, barely breathing. He brought the flashlight closer and let the light pass through the cloth. Little by little, the letters became clearer. The stain in the center became a line. The shadow took shape. It wasn't God, she read slowly. "Diego." Barbara put her hand to her mouth. "Diego is a name. It's her son's," she said without thinking. The phrase came out with weight. It didn't sound like a supposition. It sounded like certainty. She squeezed the ribbon between her fingers. The knot was clearer now. It looked like a bow made to last. Someone embroidered that name in a hurry and with love. Someone wanted her to carry that child in her arms, even if from afar. Her chest tightened. She took a deep breath, but the air entered like a knife. "She's a mother," she said with a broken voice. "This name is hers. but it's also his. The silence after that was greater than anything else. Barbara leaned on the edge of the stretcher, her eyes filled with tears. "Where is he, doctor? Where is that Diego Ismael?" He didn't know what to say. He only knew that someone with that name existed, that he was alive somewhere, waiting for the mother who was now fighting not to die alone on a cold stretcher. She closed her eyes for a moment and felt the weight of the coin on the cloth and the warmth of the ribbon between her fingers. The coin was faith, the paper was danger, the ribbon was love, and now more than ever she had to find that child, because if she woke up and didn't find Diego, her life would remain broken. He opened his eyes and whispered to the embroidered name, "Where are you, Diego? Where?" The door creaked slowly, as if it didn't have the courage to open all the way. First, a small, hunched shadow appeared, carrying a bag against its chest. Then the white light of the room revealed its face. A woman with gray hair tied in a messy bun, eyes full of tears, the labored breathing of someone who had been crying long before arriving. She held the doorknob so tightly that her fingers turned white, her whole body trembling. "Excuse me," she said in a low, drawn-out voice. "I am Doña Pilar." Ismael and Barbara looked at each other. The air in the room changed. The woman continued to stumble over her own words. "I looked for my daughter, Camila Torres. They told me she swallowed hard, and the sentence broke into pieces that died. The last words barely came out. They died. They fell to the floor like heavy stones." Doña Pilar pressed the bag closer to her chest, as if trying to hold her soul inside. Ismael took a step forward and took a deep breath before speaking. "Doña Pilar, come in." She looked up at him, saw his robe and badge, and shook her head, almost apologizing for entering a place that was not hers. "I saw your robe in the hallway," she said with a broken voice. "I followed your voice. I needed to come." "You did the right thing," he replied, firmly, but gently. "No one should be left outside when the heart is in here." Barbara approached, took the lady's arm, and offered her support. Doña Pilar accepted it as one accepts a hug. Her body was light and fragile, but she carried enormous pain with every step she took inside. The air became heavier. Her eyes searched for what they still did not want to see. Ismael slowly guided her to the edge of the stretcher. "Here she is, Doña Pilar," he said softly and respectfully. She looked first at the outline of the sheet, then at the pale skin, the loose brown hair, the face of her daughter. The world fell apart around her. "Camila." The name came out broken, a sob that came from many years of love. Her legs buckled. Ismael and Barbara ran to hold her. She didn't fall, but her whole body bent over. Her shoulders trembled. She lowered her head and bit her hand hard, as if it were the only way to keep from screaming. "Camila, my girl," she cried. "My little one." Barbara stroked her back, repeating softly, "Calm down, calm down. We're here." Ismael stood to one side in silence, respecting the moment, but his heart was beating fast because now the emptiness already had a name. Camila Torres. Doña Pilar reached out hesitantly and gently touched her daughter's hair, brushing a strand from her forehead. The gesture was slow and tender, as if she were combing a little girl's hair before she went to school. "They told me," she sobbed. "They told me she was gone, and I didn't want to believe it." Ismael swallowed the lump in his throat and moved a little closer to Doña Pilar. She wasn't dead. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears, confused, almost unable to believe what he was saying. "I'm saying that your daughter is breathing weakly, but she is breathing, ma'am." She put her hand to her chest, and her body trembled again. She looked at Camila again, and a small glimmer of hope appeared through her tears. "We are taking care of her," Ismael added. "She is fighting." Doña Pilar took her daughter's hand carefully, as if she were holding a flower that was about to break, and she cried, but this time it was different. The tears contained pain, yes, but also a glimmer of hope. Ismael took a deep breath for the first time that night. He felt that her name was not lost. Camila was no longer homeless or unknown. She was a daughter, a mother, someone. And in front of that woman, holding her daughter's cold hand, he understood Camila's identity. She was beginning to come home. Doña Pilar took 2 more steps and stopped. "Camila, my girl," she whispered, her voice almost without strength. "Forgive me for arriving late." Her free hand went to her daughter's hair and stroked it slowly, smoothing a strand stuck to her forehead, as if she were combing her hair before going to school. Her touch trembled. Barbara took a step to the side and held the lady's elbow, just to make sure she didn't fall. "She's here, ma'am," Ismael said quietly, without interrupting the moment. "I'm with you." Pilar couldn't take her eyes off Camila's face. Her expression changed completely. Pain and love at the same time. Recognition. The name they were looking for now had a face, a smell, a story. Ismael took a deep breath. The red ribbon on his wrist itched inside. He looked at her, then at the mother. Doña Pilar spoke carefully, like someone placing a glass on an unstable table. "Where is Diego?" She blinked, confused. "Diego." The name on the ribbon pointed, showing carefully without pulling on her wrist. "Diego." Pilar's eyes took a second to understand the question. It hit and bounced back. She opened her mouth, closed it, and opened it again. She saw the ribbon, saw her daughter, looked back at Ismael, her face filled with a fear that seemed like fever. With her dad, she left without thinking, like someone who grabs onto the first idea. "I don't know, no, no." With whom the phrase fell to the floor broken. With Dad, no. With whom the room became smaller. The air conditioning seemed to eat away at the doubts. Her fear entered under the door and filled the whole place. Barbara brought a chair. "Sit down, ma'am," she asked kindly. "Breathe with me." Pilar sat down, without taking her eyes off her daughter. She took her hand, kissed her cold fingers. She spoke softly, as if she were only asleep. "I am here, my love. I'm here." Then she raised her head and tried to put her thoughts in order. Diego's father began staring into space as if looking for the man at a distant point on the wall. "He left 2 years ago. He left and never came back. He doesn't send any money. Nothing." He spoke, and his face grew harder. It wasn't anger. It was old weariness. Old stories that one tells trying not to cry again. Camila Pilar stroked her daughter's hair again. She sells flowers on the street at the traffic lights. Little roses wrapped in paper, rain or shine. She doesn't stop. She says it's just to earn money for food, so Diego can have milk and shoes. I scolded her. "Take care of yourself, my daughter." And she said, "Yes, Mom, yes." Her eyes filled with tears. Yesterday, Diego stayed with me. She said she'd be back early, but she didn't come back. The words, "she didn't come back," broke the ground. Ismael felt her weight on his stomach. He thought about the paper, the coin, the marks on his skin. But the question that now wouldn't come out was only one. Then his voice came out softly, as if he were afraid of pushing the lady into the abyss. "Diego stayed with you yesterday. With me," he confirmed, touching his chest with a small but firm hand. "I gave him soup. He asked me, 'Mommy, Mommy, where?' And I said, 'He's coming, my love. He's coming.'" He fell asleep in my bed, closed his eyes as if he wanted to wake up and change the ending, and he didn't come. Barbara, who until now had been holding her breath, let out a little cry and covered her mouth. Ismael's heart rose to his throat. The ribbon with the name Diego seemed to shine with moisture. The name felt heavier. Doña Pilar said softly, slowly, "Was there someone else with him today? Now who is staying with Diego?" She lowered her head, as if trying to look inside her chest to find the correct answer. Tohit Nunez repeated, searching for the time with the tip of his tongue. "I came to the hospital early. Someone told me that Camila, and I came running." Her eyes filled with tears again. "I left him with the neighbor for an hour. I couldn't. I needed to see my little girl." Ismaela felt and understood the urgency that mother and grandmother were going through, but the question that came with the earlier call came back strongly. The telephone, the breathing, the cry of a child. Then who cried on the phone, she didn't say it out loud, but the thought wouldn't go away. Barbara looked at her and knew she had heard the same thing inside the room, was filled with the silence of an empty church. Doña Barbara tried delicately. "You know, Diego's father's number where he lives?" "No," Pilar shook her head tiredly. She changed her mind. She moved house. She left. She took a deep breath. She made an effort to return to present. Diego was with me yesterday, with the neighbor today, but Camila squeezed her daughter's hand. Camila didn't come back. Ismael stood there looking at the invisible bond that united the 3 generations. The daughter lying on the stretcher, the mother holding her hand, the grandson who was just a name embroidered on a ribbon. The image hurt him. "I'm so sorry, Doña Pilar," he said simply, because there were no pretty words that would help. "We're going to take care of her," and his voice relied on a wall of care. "We need to find Diego so he doesn't feel like he's been left alone." She nodded quickly, anxiously, like someone trying to catch a little bird with their hand. "Yes, yes, please. He's afraid of the night. He doesn't like the dark." Ismael's chest tightened. Barbara closed her eyes for a second, took a breath, and opened them again, firm. She offered her a small glass of water. Pilar took a sip, just to wet her burning throat. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, as if she had done something wrong by coming in like that. "I heard your gown, your voice, and I didn't know where else to go." She looked at Ismael directly, sincerely. "Please help me." "We're here," he replied, with the firmness he found when fear wanted to take control. "We're both here." The monitor behind them made a timid line, as if to say, "I'm trying too." The cold light shone on the red tape on Diego, wet with serum. The name was now a person, a child, a danger. Ismael remembered the earpiece in his ear, the noise, the sobbing of a child. So who cried on the phone? The question returned louder. It wouldn't go away. There would be fear. There would be urgency. There would be a gap that they had to fill with an answer. He looked at the mother, at the daughter, at the tape, and inside, the echo insisted relentlessly. Whose crying was that? Ismael took the envelope out of his robe pocket. The paper inside was still crumpled, stained with sweat and dust. He opened it slowly, carefully, as if touching a wound that could bleed again. Doña Pilar said, offering the little piece of paper. It was among her things. The lady's eyes read the crooked letters. Her mouth trembled. She brought her hand to her face before finishing reading. "Mercado Libertad, stall 17, 6 p.m. Hoka repeated with a broken voice. Barbara approached. "Do you recognize him?" Pilar did not answer immediately. She held the paper tightly, as if it were going to escape. The tear fell before the word J. She shook her head, and the name came out between sobs. "It's Joaquin." "Joaquin?" Ismael asked directly. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and the phrase came out in pieces. "He's mixed up with bad people. They're drug dealers, swindlers, bad companies. Camila knew him from the neighborhood. I asked him for help sometimes, but I told you, my daughter, that man is not to be trusted. He's going to bring you trouble." Her voice broke. She kissed her daughter's hand, as if asking her forgiveness for not having convinced her in time. "Hausen is Joaquin." Silence filled the room. Only the beep of the monitor insisted on sounding. Ismael rested his hands on the table and looked at the paper again. The simple letters now seemed burned. "Mercado Libertad, stall 17, 6 p.m. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a trap. Barbara looked at the watch on her wrist. The cold light of the room was reflected in the glass. "Doctor, it was 6 p.m. yesterday." The phrase weighed heavily. Yesterday. If Camila went to that appointment, she didn't come back, and now she was there, marked, almost dead. So it was at the market. Barbara continued, more tense. "Stall 17, that was the place." Ismael closed his eyes for a moment. The image came complete. Camila, walking quickly between colorful tarps, the voices of the vendors shouting prices, the smell of fruit, fish, and food smoke, the paper in her pocket, the red ribbon on her wrist, her heart beating fast, and on the other side, a man waiting, a man with a J in his name, and dangerous people around him. When he opened his eyes, Pilar was sitting there crying silently, with the crumpled paper in her hand. Barbara touched her shoulder gently. "It may have been a trap," said Ismael, unable to soften it. The words fell heavy, but clear. The danger now had a name and a place. Joaquin, 17, yesterday. And what had once been only a mystery now burned like fire in her chest. The automatic emergency door opened with a bang, bringing in the cold from outside, along with a sweaty young man without a jacket carrying a purple-colored girl in his arms. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, screaming without being able to form sentences. "Help, please! Her! Her voice failed her, turning into a sob. Ismail turned instinctively, feeling his heart beating in his neck. The girl had purple lips, purple fingernails, a limp neck, her head hanging down. Her shirt had a star design on it. The father was shaking so much that it looked like he was going to fall with her. The team from the other cubicle rushed over. A nurse pulled out the emergency trolley. The pediatric resident arrived, gloves already on. The sound changed. Wheels rolling, plastic tearing, someone asking for a mask, another person counting aloud. 1, 2, 3. The air was filled with the smell of oxygen, alcohol, rubber. Ismail took a step forward. The floor disappeared for a second. His leg he forgot how to obey. His mouth opened, but no voice came out. He saw the girl, and on top of her, another old scene appeared that pierced him like a knife. 4, in the emergency room years ago. A little girl with poorly done braids. The same purple rising to her lips. The same weight in the air. The same race. The same clock, worse. Sophie appeared completely inside him, suddenly, as if she had been waiting behind the door. He smelled that day, the sweat inside the mask, the cold hand. He remembered the second of doubt that turned into a hole. He remembered turning to the side, waiting for someone to say go, and that go didn't come in time. He remembered Sophie's mother grabbing her gown with both hands, as if she could stop her daughter's life there. He remembered that he didn't have the courage to look her in the eyes when it was all over. "Sorry, Sophie," escaped from his mouth so softly that it seemed like just a thought. Her father was now crying loudly, repeating his daughter's name as if it were a rope thrown into the sea. "Soul, Soul, hold on, my love, please." The name hit Ismail in the chest. He wanted to rip off his mask and run, to break through the space, to push the air away with his hands. But his body wouldn't move. He turned to the side and saw his own hand, trembling foolishly, without strength. He felt his throat close up, just like years ago. The same weight, the same heat rising up his face, the same taste of metal in his mouth. Dr. Barbara called him. Once. He didn't hear the pediatric resident rush in like an arrow. Bag, valve, saturation, airway. Ismail was stuck between desire and fear. The memory stuck to his face, preventing him from seeing the present clearly. "What if I move and it goes wrong again?" part of him screamed. "What if I hesitate again and lose another one?" the other part screamed. "Doctor," Barbara repeated closer, her hand his forearm and squeezed. She was firm, warm. "Stay here," she blinked, turning slightly. "Stay here," she said in a low voice full of truth. One at a time. Ismail looked at Camila, lying there fragile, the red ribbon on her wrist that said Diego. He looked at Doña Pilar with her hands praying silently. He looked at the other box where Alma was surrounded by the care of skilled people with trained hands. The team was already in charge. They were doing it. Guilt wanted to pull him there, but duty called him here. "One at a time," Barbara repeated, like someone grabbing a frightened horse by the halter. "You weren't there that day. You're here now with her mother. Stay here. Breathe," he breathed, but the air came in short, full of memories. He saw Sophie again, the sheet covering half her face, her silly hand smoothing one side of the sheet because she didn't know what to do with the guilt. He felt the same urge to ask the whole world for forgiveness, the urge to hide inside the gown. "I'm sorry, Sophie," he said again, almost without a voice. The father in the other cubicle shouted again, "Soul! Soul!" His crying was heartbreaking. Ismail closed his eyes for a second, just so he wouldn't fall. He heard the countdown. He heard the snap of a light bulb breaking. He heard the mask tightening. He heard the hiss of oxygen, life fighting in a place where he was no longer in control. Barbara's hand was still on his arm, her pressure keeping him steady on the ground. "Look at me," he asked softly. He looked at her. "It hurts, I know, but you have to be here for her." She pointed her chin toward Camila. The monitor made a stubborn little wave. The sheet rose and fell. Almost nothing, fragile as a lit candle, lit. He understood what she meant. If he crossed the hallway as he was, he would take the failure with him. He would let another person fall. He swallowed, ran his hand over his face, wiped away the sweat that kept pouring out. His body still wanted to run. The memory still pulled at his neck, but he stayed. He took half a step closer to Camilla, like someone returning to the right place in a photo. "I'm here," he said to Barbara and to himself. "I'm here," she whispered. One at a time, one at a time. Ismail touched the sheet next to Camilla's arm. He felt the rough fabric. He made the gesture he made when he tried not to break down. He smoothed out a little wrinkle. He adjusted a corner. He raised the pillow 1 centimeter, the least he could do without getting in the way, the least he could say. "You're still useful on the other side." The word carotid flew through the air, then a weak pulse, then, "Let's go." He didn't look. He just listened and prayed in his own way that his soul would return, that his father wouldn't collapse, that the team would have good hands, and that Sophie, wherever she was, would forgive him for taking so long to turn his face that day. Guilt throbbed, wanting to break his chest, rising, pushing, almost throwing him to the floor, almost because Barbara's hand squeezed his arm again and reminded him to stay, and he stayed. Emergency lights followed. The cold light followed. The smell of alcohol and rubber followed. Inside him, an old door creaked, wanting to open the past again. He grabbed the handle with both hands and didn't let go. "I'm sorry, Sophie," he said for the third time, with the care of someone saying a sacred name. "I'm trying." Barbara let go of his arm, but stayed close enough to grab him if he staggered. He let go slowly. He looked again at what was in front of him. A pale face, a red ribbon, a mother standing there trembling, a faint line on the screen, a life that depended on him not losing himself, one at a time. Great. I'll continue here with the second part of the translation, exactly as in the original text, and still in Spanish. Do Mexico with simple language is Camilla's body, which until that moment seemed trapped in a heavy silence, suddenly arched. It was not a small spasm. It was not a weak reflex. It was an electric shock running through every muscle. Her arms trembled. Her chest rose as if she wanted to break her own skin. The monitor let out a sharper, unexpected beep, breaking the air. Barbara was startled and almost dropped the tray with the gauze. Dr. Ismail grabbed the stretcher with both hands, leaning over her, ready to react. Calm down. Breathe with me." The seconds became eternal. After the shock, the body relaxed, but something had changed. The eyes that had been closed opened a little, just enough to let out a wet glimmer. A thick tear slowly rolled down the side of her face, falling like a stone into a still lake, making waves in everyone in the room. Santa Pilar brought her hands to her mouth, unable to believe it. Ismael lowered his face, almost pressing his ear to Camilla's mouth. Her lips trembled, forming syllables without strength. He held his breath, waiting, asking that it not be just air. And then it came out, low and raspy, almost nothing. The sound died there, but it was no longer necessary. How barbaric. She opened her eyes and spoke. Pilar couldn't hold herself up. Her legs gave way, and she fell to her knees beside Camilla, hitting the cold floor hard, but she didn't feel it. She grabbed her daughter's hand with both hands, crying loudly without shame, without holding anything back. She loves her son, she cried between sobs. She is calling Diego, the name that was embroidered on the ribbon, the name that burned in the chest of everyone, now coming out of Camilla's own mouth. It wasn't vague faith. It wasn't a symbol. It was a call. It was a mother's love crossing over to the edge of death. Ismael felt the weight of that truth sink deep inside him. It wasn't just medicine. It wasn't just luck. It was a bond. It was instinct. It was a mother calling her son, even though she didn't have the strength to open her eyes wide. Barbara put her hand over her own face, unable to hold back the tears. "Doctor, don't." "She's asking for him." Ismael took a deep breath. The air was thick with emotion. He looked at the red ribbon, now almost shining with the serum, and thought, it wasn't God. It wasn't luck. It was Diego. It was always Diego. Pilar kissed her daughter's hand, repeating between tears, "I'm here, my girl. I'm here. We're going to bring Diego back. And I promise you." The cold floor, the white lights, the beeping of the monitor, everything became small in the face of that whisper. It was little, but it was enough to break the darkness. Now there was no doubt. Camilla was fighting, not for herself, but for her son. and no one there had the right to leave her alone in that fight. The impact of that whisper still lingered in the room when the door opened again. Alvarez entered hurriedly, his jacket half open, his tie more crooked than ever, his face serious, as if he had been holding back his anger from the hallway. "It's over. It's over." His voice was firm, leaving no room for discussion. No formal bed. Past the minimum observation and enough with the drama. Barbara pressed her lips together and lowered her gaze, but said nothing. Doña Pilar, kneeling on the floor, squeezed her daughter's hand tighter, not understanding half of what was being decided, but sensing that it was something important. Ismael stood still, staring directly at the boss until he uttered the words that were burning inside. "She needs intensive care." Alvarez sighed loudly, almost mockingly, as if he had heard something crazy. "Intensive care," he repeated, raising his eyebrows. "With so many patients waiting, people with protocols, with papers, with beds assigned in the system, and you want to put a homeless person in intensive care? She's not homeless." Ismael's voice came out harder than he expected. "She has a name. She has a mother. She has a son who is waiting for her." The silence became thick. Pilar raised her eyes filled with tears, thanking him wordlessly for his defense. Barbara took a deep breath but stood firm by his side. Alvarez ran his hand across his forehead, annoyed. "Dr. Bonilla, I'm going to tell you this once. The hospital can't save everyone who is outside the protocol. If you insist, if you want to play the hero," he took a clipboard out of his briefcase and threw it on the side table. "Then sign the paper. Assumption of clinical responsibility after at the risk of the responsible physician." Ismael's heart began to beat faster. He knew what that meant. If something went wrong, if she died in bed, it would all be his fault. The board, lawsuits, front-page headlines, and worst of all, the feeling of having put his career above a life. Alvarez crossed his arms, waiting with a look that mixed defiance and weariness. "Sign at your own risk." Ismael's hand trembled before touching the pen. He looked at Camila, her eyes still half closed, a dry tear on her cheek, her chest rising slowly as if begging for time. He looked at Pilar on her knees, her thin fingers clutching her daughter's hand, repeating softly, almost like a prayer, "Hold on, my girl, hold on." He looked at the red ribbon on her wrist. Diego grabbed the pen. The tip touched the paper, his hand trembling like never before. The sound of the monitor filled the air, steady and insistent, as if it were another heart beating with his. He signed, not firmly, not confidently, but he signed. The risk, the guilt, the hope, all in the same crooked line of his handwriting. Barbara put her hand on his shoulder firmly, as if to say, without words, "You did the right thing." Alvarez took the tablet back without emotion, without applause, without saying anything supportive. He just closed the briefcase and said dryly, "Then it's yours. Take care of it." He turned and left, leaving the sound of his shoes echoing in the hallway. The silence became heavy again, but inside Ismael there was something different now. It wasn't just fear, it was commitment. He had crossed the line. It was no longer about protocol. It was about looking into a mother's eyes, hearing a daughter's almost muffled voice, and understanding that he couldn't let her go. The pen was still warm in his hand, the signature still burning on the page. And at that moment he knew the price of protocol was high, but the price of turning his back on her would be much higher. Ismael called the neighborhood community police right there in the hallway, in a low voice, direct, without beating around the bush. He explained what they had: a woman almost without a voice, a bracelet with her son's name, a note with a place and time. The sergeant arrived in 10 minutes with 2 officers in plain vests. No siren, no noise. People who knew the street. Mercado Libertad, stall 17, he said, showing the crumpled paper. That's where the story changes. Barbara already had her gloves on, but he asked her to take them off. He didn't want anyone to see anything from the hospital. A few meters away, he gave her a simple orange vest, one of those security vests without a logo. "You go with them," he said, holding her gaze. "No heroics. Listen, ask questions, take notes. Call me every 5 minutes. If anything goes wrong, you leave, understand?" She took a deep breath and swallowed her fear. I understand. Doña Pilar approached, still trembling, and grabbed the nurse's hand as if handing over a treasure. Please take care of him. If you find Diego, her voice broke. Tell him his mother is waiting for him. We're going to find him. Barbara replied firmly on the outside, her heart racing on the inside. I'll go to stall 17, I promise. One of the agents, her hair pulled back in a quick ponytail. She wrote Ismael's cell phone number on the palm of her hand. Let's be discreet, doctor, she assured him. Better to speak softly. He touched Barbara's shoulder. Just a second. Go to post 17. Ask for Jay and anyone who has seen the woman with the flowers. I'll stay with her. Stay, she said. A smile that did not hide the trembling in her hands. Ismael saw the three of them leave through the side corridor. Barbara's vest disappeared around the corner, and the silence that remained hurt. He returned to the stretcher, adjusted the thermal blanket, checked the IV, and checked the monitor. Camila was still on that stubborn line, almost like a wave. Doña Pilar prayed with her eyes closed, her fingers playing with an imaginary rosary. He put the Guadalupe coin within her reach. It's going to be okay, he murmured, more to himself than to the lady. His cell phone vibrated. A message from Barbara. We're leaving in 5 minutes. He replied with a curt, okay. The clock took forever to move forward in the Libertad market. The early morning had a different smell. The tarp still covered half of the aisles, and the rest was metal curtains, old fruit, fish sleeping on ice, bread beginning to bake. The lights were tired and yellow, and footsteps sounded loud. Barbara walked between the stalls alongside the agents. The orange vest was too big for her. Her heart was beating loudly in her ears. This way, said the agent in front. Stall 17 is at the back. The blue, green, and red tarps were piled up like a patched sky. One blue one had a large tear, torn by the wind, revealing a piece of the dark sky in the A stenciled. Mark 17 is this one, whispered Barbara. The stall was empty. A wooden table, 2 plastic boxes, forgotten wrapping paper, dusty adhesive tape, and 3 lonely rose thorns on the floor. The wet floor reflected the light like a dirty puddle, a fallen plastic cup with a little old juice. Hello, called the officer, tapping lightly on the wood. Yes, there's someone behind a pile of boxes. A thin man appeared, wearing a worn cap, with the alert eyes of someone who has lived through many early mornings. It's closed, he said at first, as if he didn't want any trouble. Only tomorrow. Barbara took a step forward and showed her empty hands, posing no threat. I'm not looking for trouble, sir. I'm a nurse. I need information. The girl with the flowers was here yesterday. She showed him the note. 17, 6 p.m. The man looked at the note, and his face changed just a little. His gaze shifted to the side, and then back. He muttered, almost to himself, the one with the flowers? Yes, she was here. Did you see her? Barbara insisted in a voice that respected the night. I need to know. He wiped his mouth nervously with his hand and looked down the hallway, afraid that someone would hear. 2 men came out, he said quietly. They weren't from around here. They looked tough. His gaze fell to the floor, as if he could still smell their presence. She was nervous. The child was crying. The words hit Barbara like a blow. The child was crying. Yes, little boy, with a Chapulín or Chavo character t-shirt. I don't know. He was crying, Mommy, Mommy. She imitated a child's cry and lowered her voice even more, but the child remained. The air left her for a second. Barbara grabbed the table to keep her balance. What happened to me? With whom? The man scratched the back of his neck, looked back and whispered as if confessing something to a father. The juice lady, Doña Rebe, the one who puts orange and carrot juice there on the corner of the hallway. She pointed with her chin without raising her arm. She takes care of children sometimes. People trust her. The man wrote quickly, Juice lady, Doña Rebe, corner of the hallway. Barbara repeated the name to memorize it, like someone who keeps a map in their heart. Doña Rebe. You know her? She asked. Everyone knows the juice lady, replied the vendor, shrugging his shoulders. Good people, but don't mess with Jay. The J came out strongly. That one brings shade. Barbara nodded her thanks. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. The man nodded, already disappearing behind the boxes as if the night could keep him in a safe place. The torn blue tarp moved in the wind and made a sad sound of tired fabric. Barbara breathed. Her heart was beating as if it were about to burst out of her chest. She looked at the corner of the aisle, where a small, yellow-painted stall still had a box of oranges on top and a juice-stained rag. A clean glass was drying upside down next to it. A hand-painted sign read, "Rebe Juices." She sent a message. "I found stall 17. The vendor says she left with 2 men. The child was crying but stayed with the juice lady, Doña Rebe." In the emergency room, Ismael read the message and felt for the first time the invisible line stretching between the stretcher and the market tarps. The crying on that phone now had a place, a bench, a name, Doña Rebe. Barbara took a step toward the juice stand and tapped the counter with her knuckles, as if asking permission before speaking. Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice came out firm. "Doña Rebe, we need to talk." The juice stand still smelled of squeezed orange peel mixed with the strong sweetness of carrots and a slight sour smell of old fruit forgotten in a corner. The yellow tarp moved with the early morning wind, causing the metal hooks to creak behind the counter. A woman in an old apron cleaned a glass with a rag, her face tired but firm, attentive eyes of someone who has seen a lot in life and learned to keep quiet rather than speak. It was Doña Rebe. Barbara took a deep breath before approaching. Her heart was beating in her neck, but she spoke simply and directly. "Doña Rebe." The woman looked up and assessed the nurse from head to toe, suspicious but not rude. "Who are you looking for?" "I'm a nurse at the civil hospital." Barbara swallowed. "I need to know if you took care of a child. Yesterday?" Rebe's gaze softened. She dried her hands on her apron and motioned for Barbara to come around behind the counter. On a wooden stool sat Diego, 4 years old, maybe 5, wearing a green t-shirt with a picture of a boy on it, faded from so many washings. His thin legs dangled in the air without touching the floor. His hair was plastered to his forehead from crying so much. He was holding a small plastic cup with traces of orange juice, but he wasn't drinking. He sat quietly, staring at his hand, where he twirled and twirled the end of a red ribbon just like his mother's, with the same crooked embroidery and the same frayed thread. Barbara's chest tightened. "It was him, Diego," she said softly, almost without wanting to scare the child. He looked up, his gaze deep, too big for his small body, the eyes of a child who had understood early on that the world can hurt. Doña Rebe crouched down beside him, put her hand on his small shoulder, and explained, "Camila asked me, if I don't come back, take care of my son, and I took care of him." The words hung in the air like a knife. Barbara felt like crying right there. A mother who knew the risk, a mother who left her son at a juice stand, entrusting his life to a neighbor because she had no other choice. Barbara knelt in front of the boy and forced a small smile so as not to appear sad. "Hello, champ. How are you?" He looked at the ground, then at her. His voice came out thin and broken. "It hurts." "Where does it hurt, Diego?" Barbara asked, her throat tight. He pointed to his chest, right in the center, here, in the heart. Tears welled up so quickly in her eyes that she had to bite her lip to keep from sobbing. She held back her tears with all her strength, but she couldn't stop her voice from trembling. "I know, my love. I know." She held out her hand. "Let's go see your mommy." His eyes lit up instantly, a spark of hope igniting. He squeezed the red ribbon between his fingers, as if it were the key to open the missing door, and then he stretched out his little hand to grab Barbara's. When their fingers touched, it was as if 2 stories were joined together forever. That of the mother, fighting for her life on a cold stretcher, and that of the son, waiting with a heavy heart for an embrace that might never come. Barbara took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a second, and promised silently, "I'll take you to her, Diego. I'll take you." Holding that little hand tightly, she knew that this was not just a medical mission. It was a rescue mission of love. The room was almost empty, only the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of a cart rolling in another area. Ismael sat alone on the hard plastic chair, his hands clasped around a worn coin of the Virgin of Guadalupe. The metal was cold, but what burned was inside. He looked at it, searching for a lost memory. When was the last time he truly prayed? Perhaps at his father's funeral, perhaps at Sophie's wake, perhaps never. Like now, He closed his eyes and murmured, almost without moving his lips, "If you're there, don't let me do anything stupid." That was all. He didn't ask for miracles. He didn't promise anything, only that they wouldn't let him ruin it anymore. He ran back to the room. The monitor flickered slowly, weakly, almost giving up. The pressure was dropping. The line was getting very thin. Camila's body moved like a drifting boat. Doña Pilar stood trembling from praying the invisible rosary so much, turning it between her fingers. Ismael knew what had to be done, but it was risky. An intervention there without the complete equipment could kill her. If he did nothing, she might leave before his eyes. His heart froze when he called Barbara. She wasn't there. It was at that moment that the door opened, first revealing the nurse's tired face, then a little hand clutching his. Diego, the boy, entered without understanding the gravity of the situation, but understanding everything. He didn't need anything explained to him. He let go of Barbara's hand and ran toward the stretcher. He stood on tiptoes and touched his mother's arm with his little fingers. "Mommy, it's me." His voice was sweet, but firm, like someone calling from the bottom of a well. The monitor reacted. The line that had barely moved jumped up. A new wave. A shock crossed Ismael's chest. Camila's hand, which had been open, closed a little, right where her son's hand rested. Her lips tried to move, first just a tremor, then a visible effort. A new wave, a shock, crossed Ismael's chest. Camila's hand, which had been open, closed a little, right where her son's hand rested. Her lips tried to move, first just a tremor, then a visible effort. A crooked, fragile smile, but a smile nonetheless. "My God!" Doña Pilar burst into loud sobs. "Camila, my girl." Diego squeezed his mother's arm tighter. "Mommy, don't go. I'm you, Diego." Camila's mouth moved again. No sound came out, but the shape of her lips was clear. "My son." Behind the door, Alvarez stood silently, without his tie straightened, without paper in his hand, just looking at her serious face. He seemed to falter for the first time. The monitor continued to draw new waves, timid but firm. Ismael couldn't think about protocols or reports. He just watched the scene in front of him, life returning, not because of his intervention, not because of a signature on a piece of paper, but because of the touch of a son. And in that moment, everything that was frozen inside him began to break. Here is the complete, faithful, and simple translation into Mexican Spanish and easy-to-understand language. The monitor, still unstable, was beginning to show clearer signs of life, but it was not yet certain. Ismael could not just watch, even though the scene between Diego and Camila had become like a beacon in the room. He took a deep breath. He took the pen out of his pocket and made quick signals to the small team nearby. More oxygen. Increase the flow. Glucose. Adjust the line. Let's go slowly, but steadily. Barbara, her face still wet with tears, understood immediately. She ran to the emergency cart, adjusted the IV, and prepared another line. Ismael stabilized the cannula and reinforced the ventilation. Every detail seemed small, but together they were a wall against the death that wanted to pull Camila back. "Don't let go," Diego asked the child, who was still holding his mother's arm with his little hand. "Stay with her." The child nodded seriously, as if he knew the mission behind him. Doña Pilar prayed in a low voice, almost like a lullaby, rocking her daughter and grandson at the same time. The pressure, which had been dropping dangerously, began to stabilize. The monitor picked up a rhythm, still weak, but more constant. Ismael felt the tension in his shoulders ease a little. "Hang in there," Camila murmured, adjusting the syringe to regulate the dose. "Hang in there." And then it happened. Her body, which had been so heavy, gave a little jump. Her eyes, which had only been open like slits, opened wide, slowly, tiredly, but open for 3 whole seconds. She looked and looked at him. "Ismael." Her voice came out raspy, like a sigh. He froze. She knew his name. Camila's lips trembled again, forming almost soundless words. "We met at the traffic light. You gave me water." His memory came back like a blow. A hot afternoon, traffic at a standstill, a woman with flowers in her arms, her face burnt by the sun. He was inside the car with a half-full bottle. She approached, extending her hand with a sad smile. He gave her the bottle without thinking, a quick thank you, the green light, and her disappearing between the cars. Was it her? Ismail's chest tightened so much that he could hardly breathe. All the weight of the guilt he carried, and for Sophie, for the lives he thought he didn't save, mixed with that memory. He wasn't a stranger. He had already crossed paths with Camila. He had already given her a drink of relief when no one else looked at her. And now, even though almost without strength she remembered, his eyes filled with tears. He said nothing, just took a deep breath, as if her breath had given him air too. Camila's eyes closed again, overcome by exhaustion, but that brief contact remained etched as if tattooed on the entire room. It wasn't magic. It wasn't a light coming down from the sky. It was technique, sweat, hard work, human hands clasped together with love that never gave up. It was the half-broken faith of a mother, the stubbornness of a son, the care of a neighbor, the whispered prayer in the hallway. Ismail smoothed the sheet over her chest and breathed for the first time without guilt. Inside, he was certain that sometimes a miracle is just the sum of work and love. The nursing station smelled of old talcum powder and chamomile tea that someone had left in a small glass next to the bed. The light was softer than in the emergency room, a yellowish tone that seemed to want to give rest. Camila was there, thin, weak, still pale, but alive. Diego lay next to his mother, drawing with a worn crayon on a sheet torn from a notebook. He drew a huge black bag, and from inside it came a full sun with rays as long as fire. He said nothing, but it wasn't necessary. The drawing spoke for him. The night wanted to swallow his mother, but life opened the zipper. Camila stroked the boy's hair with her fingertips, very carefully, as if she didn't want to wake him from a dream. When she saw Ismail come in, she looked up. Her smile was small and tired, but genuine. He took the Guadalupe coin out of his pocket. The metal no longer felt so cold. He placed it in her hands. "Keep this," he said again, in a low voice. "Loaded." The thermometer didn't lie, nor did your tear. Camila's eyes filled with tears. She clutched the coin tightly, as if it were another heart beating alongside hers. At that moment, the door opened. Alvarez entered, this time with his tie neatly in place, his face serious but not harsh. He said nothing, only approached the table, pulled out a folder, and signed without making a sound. It was the creation of the first permanent space for social use. Social space for those who arrived without a name, without documents, without anyone to vouch for them. He signed, closed the folder, and left silently. But that silence said more than any speech. Doña Pilar was sitting nearby, watching every detail with eyes that had already cried everything, and now just rested on the scene. She stretched out her wrinkled hand and grabbed Barbara's. There was no need to say thank you. That squeeze was enough. Barbara smiled at her with tears caught in her eyelashes. Ismail stood still for a few seconds, watching. Diego lifted the sheet with the drawing and showed it to his mother. "Look, Mommy," he said proudly. "Here you are. You came out of the bag." Camila kissed the drawing, closing her eyes. Inside, Ismail felt that he had changed. He could no longer accept calling someone nameless. He could no longer follow protocol without looking at their face. Now he stopped. Now he asked. Now he listened, even to the silence. How many lives do we call nameless before trying to listen to see if they are still breathing? And you who are listening now, who was the person you almost didn't see, but who needed you? Tell us in the comments. If this story touched your heart, subscribe, share it with someone who needs hope, and come back for the next video. We will continue to care for those whom the world does not see.